Countdown, there we go.
75 people registered. Back here now. That's Andres. Nice to meet you. And Emily.
Hey, Vinny.
Hey, Vinny. Nice to see you.
I don't know if I
Oh, they
know you very well, but that doesn't mean it can also be nice to see you. Thank you.
Andres is our social media person. Vinny works for Deputy Commissioner.
Just so everyone knows, this is all being recorded.
Got it. Well, I didn't know if the microphone was.
The microphone's on. It's
Got it.
Mhm.
So, I'm making more of those statements.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our final Women's History Month speaker. Today I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Tarika Barrett. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Tarika Barrett is the CEO of Girls Who Code, an international nonprofit organization working to close the gender gap in technology that has served 500,000 students to date. Tarika started her career as an educator and has spent 2 decades building educational pathways for young people at organizations like iMentor, the New York City Department of Education, New Visions for Public Schools, and New York University Center for Research on Teaching and Learning. A graduate of Brooklyn College, Tarika has an MA in Deaf Education from Columbia Teachers College, that's amazing to me, and a PhD in Teaching and Learning from New York University. Tarika has served on the boards of CS for All, Escolta, McGraw-Hill, and AT&T's Accelerator Advisory Board. Currently, she serves as a Homeland Security Advisory Council member, chair of the NYU Steinhardt Dean's Alumni Advisory Board, and is a member of the New Visions for Public Schools Board of Directors. She recently joined the ENIAC Ventures Network. Tarika is the recipient of the NYU Steinhardt School's Dorothy Height Distinguished Alumni Achievement Award, the New York City Bar Association Huntington Banks Hero Her Lifetime Achievement Award. These are alliterations, and was named one of Crain's 50 Most Powerful Women in New York in 2021, and was named to City and State's New York's Power of Diversity Women 100 list in 2022. That same year, Tarika was named a 2022 NYU Alumni Changemaker of the Year and was also named to the Diversity MBA Media's Top 100 Under 50 list and the Politics NY and AM New York's Power Women list. Wow. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Janine. I warned you not to read the whole bio.
She did.
You did not listen. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for coming and thank you for joining us today. I did read an impressive bio, but I would love to hear a little bit about your background and who you are and where you grew up, how you got here.
I appreciate that, and thank you. It's so nice to see everyone. I know we have folks online and folks in the room. I'll start, Janine, by saying I am so proud to be the CEO of Girls Who Code. We're an international nonprofit organization committed to closing the gender gap in new entry-level tech roles by 2030. We're leading the movement to inspire, educate, and equip students who identify as girls or non-binary with the computing skills to take on 21st century opportunities. As Janine mentioned, we've reached 500,000 students with our programming, 115,000 of whom are college and workforce age young women. By addressing this growing gender gap in tech, we're empowering our young people to seek out the thriving and exciting careers of the future, the ones that are going to afford them the upward mobility and improved quality of life that come with careers in tech. And so there's more. You asked me background.
Yes.
So I grew up partly in Brooklyn, New York, and also Kingston, Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the proud daughter of Jamaican immigrants, and there's nothing like living in another country to shape your worldview. How I understand issues of education, equity, access, opportunity are all shaped by that upbringing. And I was very blessed to have a mom who instilled in me very early the power of mentorship, the importance of education, and frankly, the notion that you can go into spaces, see the change that you want to have happen, but also believe that you can have the agency to make that change a reality. And so, the other thing is I went to high school in Jamaica, and then I followed in my mom's footsteps and came back to the US for college. And I can remember the hour-long bus ride I would take from the housing project where I lived to the campus of Brooklyn College, where I went to school with other kids who were also from working-class families, kids who were the first in their family to go to college. Kids were beating the odds just by being there. When I think about that experience, it became the foundation of my passion around issues of gender and racial equity in education. And I didn't know at the time that would become the beginning of, this journey that I'm on now. And I've had different experiences, some of which you mentioned. I started as a community organizer, but then I also was a classroom teacher. I then worked at ed reform organizations, New Visions for Public Schools, the New York City Department of Education, where I actually had a chance to lead the team that designed and launched New York City's first ever high school focused on software engineering.
Oh, wow.
And that was one of the spaces where issues of equity were central. It was going to be potentially what we call a screen school. It was going to be modeled after Stuyvesant High School, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. And, my role at the time was to really rally support to open that school to any kid in the city interested in programming rather than having it be screen. But that experience, along with many others, shaped sort of how I think about, the work that I'm doing now, and was a through line to being CEO of Girls Who Code, an organization that I couldn't be prouder to lead.
Well, that's amazing. And certainly it sounds like your background and experience is the reason why you've gone into education. So I'm curious how you ended up focusing on issues of equity in tech with respect to closing the gender gap and educating young people.
Yeah, I am a product of all girls education. I went to the Immaculate Conception High School for Girls in Kingston, Jamaica, the strictest school on planet Earth. I might add, I have so many stories that I could tell you about that. But I've also understood deeply the power of all girls learning spaces. I'll talk to you a bit about the gender gap because I think this is a part of the problem and one of the things that people think that we've solved, but we're far from solving, especially in tech. We need more women and people of color to seek out roles in tech because we all deserve a voice in an industry that has an outsized impact on our lives. Tech as we experience it today is very much reflective of the priorities of a privileged few who often share a singular perspective. And those are the folks who are benefiting from tech the most right now. When women and people of color enter the tech industry, they become the creators, the change makers. They become the folks who advocate, Janine, for the kinds of tech that actually meets our needs, our safety, our interests. And we absolutely are not going to see the kind of tech we want until it reflects the diversity of our community. The other thing that I want to make sure that folks listening understand is a sense of what the landscape looks like right now. And I know that this office, you have deep expertise here, you're very familiar, but here we are, and women still make up about, 26% of the computing industry. And for Black and Latinx women, statistics are far worse. We're talking about hovering around 5% of all computing jobs.
Wow.
Half of women in tech say they lack female role models. A third feel they have unequal access to opportunity when compared to their male counterparts. And then when you start to look at leadership across tech at the most senior levels, there are no, Black or Latinx women who lead Fortune 500 tech companies. So that's an important thing to point out. And even though these numbers really underscore this really difficult path we have ahead, it's more than just about statistics or numbers. We're talking about people's lives here. Tech jobs are among the fastest growing and highest paying in our economy. We're expected to add 500,000 new jobs between now and 2029. And those are jobs that pay. On average, STEM jobs pay 26% more than other jobs. And I'll offer you another statistic. While the wage gap for Black women compared to white men is about 63 cents to the dollar, in the tech industry it's 90 cents to the dollar. And while not perfect, you recognize that these jobs offer a pathway and a trajectory to an improved quality of life and upward mobility that you can't deny a whole segment, of society. Like, you can't do that. The last thing I'll speak about in terms of why this issue is important is that we're far past the point we can opt out of tech. Tech intersects every aspect of our lives, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about safety and security, voting rights, healthcare. And so we have to recognize that while tech has been incredibly democratizing, it has also been the source of significant harm.
Sure.
We have too many examples in our current society where tech doesn't meet our needs or actually is harmful to people of color. I don't know how many of your audience recall the New Jersey man who was wrongfully accused of committing a crime and spent 10 days in jail because facial recognition software had incorrectly identified him. We also, which of course we know the implications of that could have been beyond severe, knowing what we know about what's happening right now in our society with law enforcement and our community. There's also the example of a recent health app that was released to the market with no functionality around menstruation or fertility. Imagine having a health app that doesn't actually think about the needs of 50% of the population. So, these are stark examples, but they're powerful ones. And, for the folks who are tuning into this, we all have to think about how we ensure that our young people, they're so talented, have these opportunities, because I promise you, they're going to be the ones to bring us the tech that's actually going to solve our problems at the community level and frankly, globally.
So I was actually going to ask you what you think or how you think it would impact changing tech to the kind of tech we want, having the gender gap close.
Do you mean sort of what we think we'd be able to see?
Yes. What are the changes we'd see?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, Janine, would be what we're talking about. I was reading an article recently where I think the person said, don't take tech functionality for granted. When you go to wash your hands and the machine doesn't turn on, don't assume that it's some weird glitch. Don't assume that because tech doesn't meet your needs, it could be that it's actually not recognizing dark skin. It could be that other things are going on. And I really deeply believe when I think about our students in our program and the kinds of, so Girls Who Code, we start as early as 3rd grade and we all go all the way with our programming to college and the workforce. We have free after school programs. In schools we also have summer programming, and then now recently we have college loops on campus and workforce programming just to make sure that our young women and non-binary folks are cementing pathways into tech. And across these experiences, there are many projects that our young people take on. And overwhelmingly, Janine, they pick things that improve society. Like it's not, and we had this powerful campaign at one point called Make That Change, which told our young people that when you pursue a career in tech, not only can you change your community and the world, but you can also change your personal and financial trajectory as well. We never want our young people to think it's a dichotomy. I'm either going to make money or I'm going to do something positive. We don't believe that they should think about it that way. Because when they put their minds to it, they're doing incredible things that you wouldn't believe. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of our alums, I actually just saw her over the weekend because we celebrated our 10th anniversary at this multi-day event called Code Fair. And one of our alums, Karina Pavlovich, had an activation at this 3-day event that we hosted here in Manhattan. During the pandemic, Karina saw, she was just at home like all of us, that frontline medical workers had no PPE. She herself, a technologist, decided to begin 3D printing, Janine, PPE for frontline medical workers. But she didn't stop there. She galvanized a coalition of 3D printer owners across the globe, and they subsequently manufactured tens of thousands of units of PPE that they then disseminated to frontline medical workers. When you teach a girl to code, she doesn't just become a coder, she becomes a change maker. And we have to recognize that access to tech and awareness for our young people of the intersectionality of tech and health and tech and music and tech and art and tech and law and all of these things mean that they're going to be solving problems that we have that we don't even fully articulate yet. Mm-hmm. And we have to have those rich perspectives and backgrounds at the table.
Well, I love the story you just told us. Are there any other success stories that you'd like to share?
Yeah, we have so many, and I always get in trouble because I'm like, you need to listen more, Tarika. So one that touched my heart recently is that we had 4 of our alums create augmented reality filters for Instagram in advance of the Wakanda Forever premiere in partnership with the Chadwick Boseman Foundation and Meta in honor of his artistry and legacy. And when that happened, it almost brought tears to my eyes because here were our young people bringing the beauty, bringing a lot of this to an experience and broadening it to a lot of other folks. We have other students who are like, working at Marvel on like all kinds of, so this Code Fair, Janine, which blew our minds because we had almost 3,000 people attend this 3-day event in New York City in honor of our 10th anniversary, and we had parents and young people every day, and this is not, I thought these things couldn't happen. A student would come up to me, I had one each day, which is plenty, and give me a book. Here is a book that I've written. I also interned at NASA last summer. The stories were, and the thing that I guess I want to underscore is that sometimes you think that you have to have some phenomenally deep intervention that happens to be able to change a young person's life. Guess what? You don't. It can be as simple as a single touch point that a young person has with a technologist, with someone who believes in them, with someone who encourages them to think about computer science or a role that's adjacent that can cause them to think about their own trajectory in a completely different way. And so I was overwhelmed with the many success stories. We also, it was our first ever alumni advisory council that we assembled 25 young people who have been a part of our programming over the years, who are now themselves either in college or beginning to enter the workforce, who are now our advisors. And here we are sitting, basking in this idea that these young women are now going to help us think about how to reach even more and more students. Really, really powerful.
Well, it sounds very powerful. And I love that you said that young people don't have to choose between helping society or making money anymore, and that if they go into tech, they can do both and be change makers. That's amazing. So how do you think, in honor of Women's History Month, how do you think that how does your Girls Who Code empower women and young girls to be involved in STEM and STEAM. And do you have any suggestions for how we can help as a technology agency or as individuals? How can we help that?
That's a great question, and I really think the answers range from what you can do individually, but also maybe some reflection at the team level and at the organizational level, because I think that's important. You know, we did a study, Girls Who Code, recently with Logitech that really found and underscored the importance of parents, teachers, people in young people's lives who tell them and encourage them that they can be a part of tech. Because sometimes you think it's only going to be some, you know, obscure role model out there, but actually nudges from people actually make a difference. At Girls Who Code, we often say you can't be what you can't see. And our girls learn early on, even before they're 10 years old, double digits, about men like Mark Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Albert Einstein. But they don't hear about these incredible, extraordinary female pioneers in tech. The Katherine Johnsons, the Mary Jacksons, the Grace Hoppers, the Ada Lovelaces, the Jean Barticks of the world. A lot of that history is very much muted or erased. And so when you ask what folks can do, it's dispelling this archetype that a programmer is still a boy in, you know, in the basement of his parents' place wearing a hoodie, or some guy in Silicon Valley running this company. We have to, you know, tell our young people and change a culture that tells them that, you know, as marginalized young people in particular, that they don't have a place in tech. So a lot of, you know, everything from what you do individually around an intern, someone in your family asking those kinds of questions. But as a division, I would, you know, hope that you will remain in conversation about how you're comprised. Like, when you look around, do you see the diversity in tech that you want to see in your own ranks?
Right.
Leadership across the board. Who are the technologists that you're bringing on? One of the things that I talk a lot about, we don't even have a question about this, that we discussed, is how organizations think about talent. We have such a narrow and privileged notion of academic credentialing and success that continues to mean that we're leaving a lot of talent on the table. And when you don't embrace a growth mindset and don't believe those young people in front of you can do it, and you don't kind of rethink whether or not all of these prerequisites you say are required are really true, when in fact we know much of this is taught the minute that person comes through the door, how different could our talent pipelines look, and how different could our recruitment processes look if that were the case? One of the things that Girls Who Code did in response to the pandemic, which was really difficult, we surveyed our community, our alums, and learned that 30% of them had had a job offer or internship rescinded, and 40% of our seniors were still looking for work. And one of the things we decided to do was launch hiring summits, because we wanted to get hiring managers in front of these incredible young people who they otherwise wouldn't see. And I remember our first hiring summit, Janine, where we didn't know what was going to happen. We had over 900 young people come, and this is all virtual. And, you know, there were companies who did no hiring, and there were companies who did. We had one company hire 17 young women from the first hiring summit.
Wow.
When you approach something like that, there's a level of purpose, intentionality, and commitment to changing the culture of your organization that's represented in a move like that. But it didn't stop there. They also created a trajectory of support for these young women. They thought about mentorship, they thought about leadership opportunities, and they mapped that out for these young people. That same corporate partner has since hired 91 Girls Who Code alums since the pandemic.
Wow.
And that is what we're talking about. Companies who want to be first and not last, organizations who understand that they're leaving talent on the table, and that our young people are the answer to all of our problems as it relates to technology.
Well, that is very inspiring. You know, you mentioned how important it is to have people in young people's lives to give them a nudge.
Yes.
To have female role models in order to get women involved, or young women involved in tech. I'm curious, have you had any mentors or role models in your career that have made that impact for you to get you in this world?
I have, and I've been so blessed to have folks help me along the way. The one that I'll talk about, I think, is a good one, because sometimes you think that you've arrived or you're old, and then you can't have like anyone help you or be
Right.
you know, because you think like you're only the mentor. I would say one of my strongest examples of mentorship that was shown to me happened when I was doing my PhD. I was a grown woman, and I managed to have 2 children and get a PhD in 4.5 years. So
Wow.
it was something. Let's just say it was an out-of-body experience.
Literally.
I'm not all of it. Like, I don't know how exactly I did it, but one of the things that was a bit insane along the way is that I had one person who was my chair, but who ended up leaving NYU really abruptly, and I was still like midstream. That could have been panic-inducing, spiraling, like, what am I doing? I need to go. But I found a mentor in Leslie Santee Siskin, who herself, a mom, her kids were all grown, but she understood where I was in my journey and understood the support I would need to get over the finish line. And she was deeply supportive and pragmatic. And, you know, sometimes you don't think your mentors can come further along in your career journey, but I've had so many folks show me kindness, her among them, and she was just so good. Like, sometimes when I thought I couldn't do it anymore, she'd just give me some really tangible, like, practical advice. And I still use some of her techniques in my own management to this day because it was so helpful when I'd get in my head and she's like, no, that's 30 minutes worth of work. I'm like, okay, 30 minutes, I can figure that out, as opposed to, like, you know, getting lost in something that's more complex. And I think that very often we forget the role that mentorship and allyship and sponsorship can play for a young person. And sometimes we think that if we're not in positional power, we cannot do those things. But I challenge each of us to think about what that looks like for a young person. Because it can be advice, it can be an introduction to someone else, it can be something much more purposeful and intentional that's structured within your organization. And I've seen tremendous variability there. What it cannot be is absent, or it cannot be something that no one ever talks about or cares about. That if you have any pipeline into this and you're hiring people, mentorship should be something you're asking. You know, someone paired with someone, are you checking in on that? Because it's very easy also to make assumptions about what those relationships look like and how they're taking shape. But just a bit of support can make a world of a difference around a really high quality mentorship experience. Because this wasn't structured of what I was doing with my dissertation chair, other than her being my chair. But it's, you know, in careful reflection that I realized like that was a beautiful mentorship relationship. I could then turnkey and think about how I could be that person for other people in my life too.
So I want to follow up on that a little bit. How important was it for you to have that mentorship? How did you find your mentor? And how did you develop that relationship such that your mentor was there for you, was able to guide you, was able to advise you?
Gosh, this is one of the minefields that I feel young people have a really hard time navigating, Ginny, because there's really no playbook for this. I don't think I ever went into it in a very like conscious, I will find a mentor. That's actually not true. When I got to NYU, I kind of did that. And it was a wake-up call because the person I thought I wanted to work with, who I read about and done all this research around, we met and it didn't click.
Right.
It was very clear that she was not interested, and then with her not being interested, I was not interested. And that was interesting as a learning experience. So one thing that's a takeaway is recognize that your mentorship can look different with different people.
Right.
And while that wasn't going to be a mentorship relationship, I quickly evaluated whether that would be, like, is there any value? What could I do? But it ended up just not being a relationship that I pursued. And it was not the end of the world. This other relationship happened through an authentic touch point. So I took a class with this person, a professor, this is Leslie, and then through that touch point, that became a natural way to deepen our relationship. What I hate most is contrived, where you feel like you're just kind of out there, can someone be my mentor? There's like, that's rough. I think it's a lot more someone with whom you've worked, someone who, you know, you've had a conversation with, and even if that person you're not clicking with that person, why not ask them for an introduction to someone else? And hopefully the person would find it within themselves to recognize I should step up.
Right.
But if not, then at a minimum, they may not take any offense that they would be introducing you to someone else. I think a lot of it has to be anchored in an authentic interest in what someone is doing. If you are really, someone's working on a project, ask about it. You know, if don't ask about it if you don't care, please. Like, this is an important thing. The contrived stuff doesn't work because you can't sustain it. If you happen to really genuinely be interested in a colleague, do coffee and keep it really light, see what comes of it. But this is where I think also we have to recognize that we can't just leave our new hires out to sea. We can't trust that they know how to navigate this. I have navigated so much to be able to bring the quote unquote wisdom and reflection. But at the time, I wouldn't have necessarily known. I think of my own missteps along the way, where I'd say, I want to go meet a professor. Did I read their book? No. Read the book before you meet the professor, or at least do some graduate skimming. There are little tips and tricks and ways, but how much that would resonate with someone who's trying to navigate. Be generous. Generosity of spirit when it comes to mentorship and looking out for people who are with you is just so critical. Kindness and making sure that you're not just kind of in your siloed, heads down doing your work. Pick your head up and look around and think about who that other person is that you can bring along.
Right. Well, so I'm curious, do you still have a mentor now that you are CEO?
I would say I'm so busy. Leslie and I still grab dinner. Even then, I get to kind of pepper her with questions. It'll be more macro questions about state of education in New York City schools or different things that I can ask her about. And it still brings me so much joy. I can show her pictures of my teenage kids and see what her grandkids are up to. Mentorship just looks different now. I think that for senior folks, I have colleagues who have really benefited from some of these more structured networks of colleagues where you are part of that, and then that kind of either council group, that sometimes is really important, especially if you can find like people in your domain, be it technology or HR or some other aspect of leadership that you want to hone. I would not also think about it in a vertical way. I think you want to think about it in a very lateral, like horizontal way as well, because I don't even know, Janine, that I always think about it as mentorship, but how many folks from a thought partnership perspective that I can sort of reach out to, ask questions of, that is among the biggest things in your professional career that you want to be able to cultivate, because those are the folks you're going to want to lean on as you continue with your career. And the other thing I think that's kind of wonderful now is that I'm so touched when someone says, will you be my mentor? And I was like, are you sure that's what you want? But I have found that it has ranged from folks who are professional, like world professionals, who said, would you mind, because there are very specific things that they may want my support around, and I always say yes. And I have, one of my mentees, Kaya Sumachayo, is actually an alum from our program, who has a wonderful story and just very compelling. She was a student in a Girls Who Code program some years ago. She's now on the malware team at Bank of America, which is phenomenal because she had no coding experience before she came to Girls Who Code. Her mother was a refugee from Uganda who came here after her school was bombed, and she fled that military dictatorship, and she raised Kayasu and her 3 siblings on her own. And it was in our program that when Kayasu's dad left, and then they were facing eviction and some other challenges happened. The reason I mention this is that Kayasu's resilience meant that she actually never stopped our program. She kept showing up every day, even though she was struggling to find a place to live, because she believed in the power of what this thing was that she was falling in love with called coding, and that this might be a future for her. Fast forward, I dragged my son, reluctant, he's such a teenager, to DC to see her graduate from George Washington University, beating the odds and becoming one of the few women who graduate with a degree in the field. That's only 19%, by the way, in terms of women with CS degrees. And now here she is, at Bank of America on the malware team, this computer scientist who is living the dream. And our students are like fangirling all day. They see her and they're like, oh my gosh, Kayasu, you're doing this thing.
Right.
And they see each other and they see that here is this wonderful Black woman in tech fulfilling her dreams, and that other Black and brown girls and non-binary students can look at and say, it's possible. She didn't know one line of code before she started with Girls Who Code. Very, very powerful stories, and we have many, many stories like that. And now our relationship, even though she, we talk about it as mentorship, but we talk, I think, about twice a month And most recently, I went to DC for a Homeland Security meeting, and we had lunch, and I was like, look at us, ladies who lunch. We're sitting here, we're talking to each other, I'm hearing about what's going on with her, I'm sharing, and talk about a mutual support system. I'm getting as much from her as I hope she's getting from me. And I'm also learning about the challenges facing, a young woman in tech. Who's talking to you? What are you learning? Do you feel like you understand what's happening at the company? What are the experiences? Do you feel like you're getting professional development? Because she's the expert right now, helping me to further refine our programming to ensure that it meets the needs of students. So it's a really powerful and beautiful thing.
So, you said that you always say yes when someone asks you to be a mentor.
It's true.
How do you not burn out from that?
I think that I really deeply believe in anchoring your, for me, I guess I'll call it practice, but like how I think about work and joy. And all of these doors that have been opened for me, Janine, were because of kindness, in my opinion. I think about conversations that I had that folks didn't even know me that well, but they had met me and said, they then opened a network, and I was able to have like a job interview, or I was able to have a conversation. So at a minimum, someone reaches out to have a conversation, my answer is yes. From that point on, I would be like absolutely pragmatic. I wouldn't say like someone's just like, I want you to be my mentor. I would say, let's talk, let's have some touch points.
Sure.
And then see. But these things happen organically. I've never had a challenge where I feel like I'm like, I have too many people to mentor, and that's not what it looks like at all. Our students are incredible, but I think the larger question is, how do we keep ourselves whole when the work is so hard?
Yes.
And that is a journey. I don't think that I have arrived by any means, but our students and their stories affirm me in ways that I feel blessed to be able to do the work that I'm doing every day, because not everyone gets to say that.
That's right.
That you're doing a job that is changing the world, or doing a job that's changing people's lives, and that's an honor. And so that definitely fuels me. But I also get tired. We joked, Robin, you, Janine, and myself, that I was dead inside after our 3-day co-chair event. So I think everyone has to make sure to give yourself some rest, and I think space for reflection probably helps a great deal. You're probably a stronger mentor if you can actually, lie down every once in a while and think and ponder. But yeah, the burnout, I feel like everyone has the burnout question, because it's so hard to do this work because we're all kind of overextended. But hopefully giving ourselves a bit more grace. I think the pandemic did kind of allow for a bit more of a lens on self-care and a bit more grace. So I'm trying. Is my answer.
I understand. So you also earlier mentioned mentorship, allyship, and sponsorship.
Yep.
Can you describe what you mean by each of those? And then how do you determine what you're going to do with each person that you interact with?
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm not an expert in the different domains. At some point I have to give you this person's name. I attended a panel, but the person who spoke before me was an expert in these 3 areas. I'll have to track that person's name down. She was phenomenal. Because, to be honest, some of this is also within the frame of a corporate setting where folks think about these things very differently. I probably, in broad strokes, think of all of this, being layered and looking similar. The allyship is often one that's used for men, I find, when it comes to issues of equity, where we try to say, step up, be an ally. I would just ask that folks who want to do that really concretely think about how you operationalize that. Like, is being an ally saying you're supportive? I went to a talk where, in this case, the person who was the sponsor for the Black ERG group, a year prior, I think, had said, we need to do something at this company, and said, I'm going to order some pizzas. I'm going to just put out a call up to everyone. 20 employees came, they sat over pizza and made a plan. That group grew to 230 in the subsequent year. And that, for example, is allyship that looks different.
Sure.
Because all of a sudden, the problem was named, a plan was put in place, and some action and resources were brought to bear. That's what I offer on thinking about allyship beyond just saying, I support you. The mentorship we talked about, and a lot of that is just the regular cadence of connection. Not just saying you're a mentor in name, but saying, how often do you talk to that person? Are you asking them time and time again, am I being helpful? What more could I do tell me what this looks like for you. What are some of the questions? Being a bit more probing rather than just saying, and listen, it's also good just to have people know that you're in their corner too. That has real value. Sponsorship is probably the thing that I know the least about, because I do think it's kind of coupled. It's something in a corporate setting. I think it has more structure.
Sure.
I think it's more concrete. I think it probably has outcome metrics associated with, and that pairing probably leads to tangible opportunities or commitment around certain opportunities and exposure that person is held accountable for. That's my guess, but I think that there are people who know much more than I do about sponsorship, but I suspect that person feels like really tethered and really beholden to that person's success and is shepherded
And promotes
through.
them.
This is what I would think. This is what I would think, Janine, but perhaps you know more about this than I do.
So you have just given us so much to think about and talked about this amazing program. So I'm curious, if we have employees who have interest in getting their children into Girls Who Code, how do they go about doing that?
This is a really good time of year to do it because we are, I hope I'm not wrong. I think the summer program is still open in terms of applications, but we also have so many different activities. We have everything that we do is free for our students. Our flagship program was our summer immersion program, and pre-pandemic, it was 7 weeks long. We would have 1,600 girls at 80 corporate partner offices across the country learning to code from 9 to 4. So you can just imagine all the experiences that these students would, because they were at Pixar, they're at Google, they're at Square, they're like all over the place, including other partners. When the pandemic hit, we converted that to a 2-week immersion, which is still really, really amazing and exciting. It's virtual, but applications are open for that. For folks who want to start a Girls Who Code club or participate in one, you can go to our website and get more information there. If you have a college student, we have Girls Who Code college loops at over 270 campuses across the country. And then very recently, because of the pandemic and the need to make sure that all this hard work that our students had put in wasn't going to be undone by the pandemic, we started programs like Work Prep and our Leadership Academy and technical interview prep programs and more that allow our young people to gain exposure so that they really can get that on-ramp into a tech internship or job. So girlswhocode.com, you can find out all about that continuum of programming, because we really do own that pipeline from 3rd grade all the way to college and career, and we have opportunities for everyone if they're interested.
So my next question was going to be, you talked about how important it is to have women in technology to empower and develop the female base. Do you have programs for adults who are no longer in college, who are moving along in their careers, and what kind of programs do you have for them?
So it's a great question. It actually came up during our weekend during Code Fair because we had all this programming, including like after dark evening conversations, and we had the general public come into this. And I had more than one woman come up to me and say, but I'm not in college anymore. I'm not, what do you have? We have really followed our cohorts almost in terms of what their needs have been. So at this time, we don't have programming for what I would call the reskilling and upskilling category.
Sure.
But we also have incredible partners. So one organization that is fantastic is NPower, and Bertina Ciccarelli, who is phenomenal. They do a lot of upskilling and reskilling, and certainly that's one resource I would encourage any of your audience who wants to know more about that. Bertina and her team can fill you in. What's heartening though is that at least we're talking about this, as opposed to thinking like you didn't do tech, so you can't do tech. Nothing could be further from the truth, because these are actually attainable skills. These are not based on some magical thing that you're supposed to know or discern because you had this particular pathway. So I'm excited for the ways in which hopefully we'll build the tech ranks with folks who are coming back and taking tech on as a career. And we also know that so many women and non-binary folks and people of color, frankly, were discouraged in terms of tech when they were younger because they went to CS 101 classes or the class after that and looked across the classroom and didn't see anyone who looked like them. So hopefully some people actually fall in love with tech again and decide to enter. But that's a great question.
So I have one more question, but before I do, I just want to let everyone know that after this last question, we will be taking questions from the audience. And if you are viewing us online, please put your questions in the chat. So you worked with Doja Cat to create the first ever codable music video. Can you tell us about that collaboration and any other exciting collaborations? And can you tell us what that means?
Great question. So this campaign was the moment where I gained credibility in the eyes of my teenage children.
There you go.
It was the one moment they're like,
Doja Cat.
Doja Cat, drop the mic. We have been so fortunate to have many collaborations. Because our founder Reshma Sajani, when she founded Girls Who Code, believe it or not, and this might sound crazy, it wasn't about coding for her only gene. It was about building a movement. Mm-hmm. It was about empowering girls to change the world, for them to identify what it is they want to do. And so since our inception, Girls Who Code has always been more than code. It's been, yes, teaching girls computer science fundamentals, yes, igniting that passion for CS and getting them to persist in the field, but it was also the deep work of changing culture, changing the image of what a computer scientist looks like and does, because our girls have been inundated with these notions that they don't fit into that mold or that space. So that culture work has always been right side by side with the actual teaching of computer science. So, for example, we teamed up with Penguin to launch a book series about women in tech aimed at babies through middle school. We partnered with American Girl to launch a gamer doll named Courtney. We worked with Lizzo to create a music video for our community, which people are like, Lizzo? Really? Seriously, you can go online and see it. We have a video with her. We worked with Lida Hill's If Then campaign just to create basically a video that would show the world what the internet would look like if there were no female coders, and give you a hint, it's terrible. I mentioned the Make That Change campaign, where we feature real life, women in tech, including Minerva Tantoko, and folks, so that they could see, the ways in which women are already changing the industry. And Doja Cat was phenomenal because she is someone who's actually passionate about tech and, believed in representation. And we knew that being able to create the world's first ever codable music video with her for her song Woman, which was incredible, would mean that we would have eyeballs on this like never before. And especially for our Black and Brown community, who would look at this video and say, wait a second, because we made the code, you didn't have to have any CS experience, but when you change the background for the video, or you change the, it was like petals that were falling, or the color of the cloud, or there were different elements you could change. You could see if it was, Python or JavaScript, or what the programming language was that was being edited. And our goal was to pique their interest and to make sure that folks say, wait a second, if this is what I can do, and I can bring my creativity and my passion and my knowledge of CS and make something like this, I'm in, which is often what happens the minute that you let a young people see something like this. And so we have done that and other campaigns. We did Girls Who Code Girls for Computer Science Education Week recently, which was kind of, a clap back to the gaming industry that continues to, women make up almost half of gamers, yet the representation of women is like an abomination. Hypersexualized, ridiculous outfits, like who's gonna fight a zombie apocalypse in a crop top? Nobody. That's not realistic. And yet these are the images that our young people are bombarded with. So we created this wonderful platform where our community could go in and develop their own avatars, skin color, skin texture, hair texture, jumpsuit, because that's sensible, what that looks like, and do all of these things. And so we are very much, it's important for us to be in the vanguard, to be at the cutting edge, to make sure that our young people see what's possible. And so those culture campaigns are a big piece of that.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
You all are doing amazing work.
Thank you. That means a great deal. Thank you.
Are there any questions from either the live audience or from?
So we have a comment from somebody who had to drop. They said somebody in our office said, this is a fantastic discussion and practical as well. Many thanks for Dr. Barrett's points on thought partnership and the types of change people of color, women, and non-binary people bring to tech spaces. And then the one question we have is, Doctor, is higher education still an important factor at the start of a talented young woman's career today, given its increasingly higher cost?
Gosh, that is the spicy question that I was also asked during Code Fair.
Spicy.
Because some of our young people in the audience, they're like, college, yes, college, no college. And what's interesting about that pre-pandemic, and you know, it was all college or bust, right? Like everything was go to college, that's your only pathway. And then, you know, our kids, pandemic happened and everyone was recalibrating and rethinking. The answer I gave our young people who were in the audience really was that I think it's about what's the best fit for you. I think blanket statements about college isn't worth it or don't do that, that makes no sense. I think you have to start thinking about your own personal trajectory and what you need, and to assess, like if you want to go into tech, to your question about upskilling and reskilling, boot camps have taken off in phenomenal numbers as people start to think about entryways into tech that were quote unquote non-traditional.
Sure.
We also know the tech industry is notorious for hiring people straight out of high school if they want to, or straight out of wherever if they know how to code or if they think that they can train them up. So much of this, I think, is a careful assessment of the landscape and a sense of what those options can be. We continue to have a lot of our students go to college and pursue computer science. Even in college programs, some of those don't even always tell them how to kind of confront a technical interview or how to think about some of these barriers that come up. So I will not say that, you know, these college programs are the be all and end all, but be discerning. I think the other factor is to be discerning around spaces at the college level that are actually welcoming to young women, people of color, non-binary folks, because the other thing is you go into a college program for CS and it's not supportive, and then that could be a real problem too. So I think the value proposition that college presents is one that we're all evaluating. I am not a believer in debt, student debt, and I know that that may feel controversial to folks. But that's something that I think to continue to think deeply about based on what you think your earnings are going to be. I think a lot of our young people were very convinced that it was all about getting into the best college they got into without thinking about implications for their family's income and their own personal income beyond graduation, and that has been a wake-up call. And so if we're all thinking about that really carefully, I think we've come a long way.
Yeah. Is there
There's a question in the
follow-up?
chat. No, different question in the chat.
Let's get one live question and then we'll go back to the chat.
Great.
So on the topic of creating welcoming environments, we are about to welcome about 75 summer interns to this organization.
Love it.
And I would love your advice to the teammate, supervisor, and then organization about how to create a welcoming environment.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would probably say, I would love to connect you with our Chief Program Officer, Dr. Danny Volo, because we think about this so deeply at Coast and Code. We talk about our community and what we call the sisterhood. It's one of our core values alongside candor and quality and girls first leadership, bravery. We think about these things very deeply. And those first touch points are everything. How a young person is brought into this space and how they understand who they are and what you're asking of them and whether or not you believe in them and what you think they're going to do is everything. Having every member of your team be welcoming, eye contact, all that, like there's so many nuts and bolts about how to do this. But think intentionally both about how they connect to your team, but with each other. Keep an eagle eye open for things that, like we had one of our alums talk about doing a program at one of our corporate partners where it was a fellow intern who told her the only reason she was there was because she was a woman in black. This was said to her. So you have to catch yourself when you're running a program to pay attention, because luckily she understood the sisterhood and she understood how she was going to navigate that, and she was empowered enough to figure out who to speak with and how to navigate that. She shared that at a recent board meeting with us, and our board members were really surprised for two reasons. That it was still, these kinds of things happened, and a reminder. And second, that our alum was so clear and poised and thoughtful and reflective and had no qualms about saying it to this group of board members about what her experience was, which is powerful, as opposed to not sharing it because you think that you can't share or be plain about things that happen to you that are challenging. There's so much complexity in a young person's experience. Anticipate different learning styles, anticipate different ways of working. Be attuned to how you want to communicate, pay attention, show kindness, provide individual support as well as group support. There's so many things I could tell you, but I know you're already doing a lot of them and probably doing them well. But I'd be happy also to connect you with a member of our team just to think about how we do on, what we call like an onboarding or early connection. Oh, that's a great question.
So the question in the chat is, do you cover cybersecurity in your program?
Funny you should ask. So prior to this past year, we did not cover cyber because we often were doing, we did a lot of web design based on our students' interests. We were so fortunate for a number of reasons. I was invited to go to the White House where I had a chance to meet a number of folks who were, we're talking cyber is something that crosses every possible domain. And so it was the corporate world, it was education, it was the nonprofit community that all came for a cybersecurity summit with President Biden. From that experience, we had a chance to then deepen a partnership with Director Jen Easterly and CISA out of the White House. And among the things we did was a campaign called like Changing the Face of Cyber, where we featured all these incredible women and women of color in the cybersecurity space so that our young people would see them. The other side of that, in addition to the culture campaign, is that we develop programming in cybersecurity, as well as we have support from one of our board members who just rolled off, Craig Nomark, who is deeply passionate about misinformation, combating misinformation, disinformation, and cybersecurity, and help support some of the program development that we did. We had clubs challenges around cyber. We had all kinds of things that we were doing in terms of cybersecurity, because guess what? There are 755,000 open cybersecurity jobs alone. And we need to fill them. Our nation's security is on the line, and we need our young people to take those jobs. And so for us as an organization where we are very fortunate to have an identity and a brand that people recognize, it's for us to say to these young people, these are opportunities. You may have never thought cyber was real for you, but let's tell you what this could look like. Here are some of the things. Like my mentee, Kayasu, who's doing malware at Bank of America, we didn't know that would be the dotted line, but here she is changing the face of cybersecurity. And so we're really, really proud to have this as one of the things that we're doing right now.
We have one more question in the back.
One more question.
Firstly, thank you for coming out to OTI, and also I appreciate your presentation overall.
Thank you.
I have a question in regards to the mass layoffs that's happening with the
Industry.
Yep. So I guess my question is there a specific program geared towards like career planning to where it teaches a female to be irreplaceable or indisposable within the tech community? Because you have to think about that. I know that it is a scare because of the economy and there, of course, lessening a lot of people are working in the tech industry, but that is like the big, factor in the future of, the tech. Yeah, the tech world is getting smaller, so they're picking up certain individuals. So there needs to be some, of course, awareness of how to be, how to stand out, how to stay.
Yeah.
So I just want to, just in case the audience in here, the question was, how do you teach women to be indispensable in the tech industry in light of all the current layoffs?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. So the first thing I would say about big layoffs in tech, because it's been a hard cycle, right? Between tech layoffs and then what's happening in banking, it can create that feeling of tremendous economic uncertainty. But the important thing, and this is what we try to tell our young people, is to not be discouraged. If you also look at where these layoffs are happening, they're almost exclusively, not exclusively, but very centered in big tech. And sometimes we lose ourselves because big tech gets all the attention, right? We know the big tech firms that you list out and think of when you think of all the layoffs that have recently happened. But what we try to remind our young people, every company is a tech company. Every company is a tech company.
That's right.
And so when you're looking for a job, and when you think about even the New York ecosystem, and that's why we partnered with Tech NYC to launch Tech Year NYC last year, providing all these students with jobs and internship opportunities in smaller tech companies in New York City, is to open everyone's eyes to the diversity of tech. Just be candid, many people aren't getting jobs at some of these big tech companies because they're struggling with issues of talent and recruitment because they haven't quite caught up to all the talent that's being left on the table anyway. And so I would say that think about a lot of these smaller companies that are going to have smaller ecosystems, but like tech is alive and well there. Keep anchoring, in your creativity, in your passions, and where these company opportunities intersect with what you're doing and what you believe in. I wish there was some magical answer to make yourself indispensable. My ethos is like work hard, be kind, be friendly, the usual things that you do. But one of the watch outs for us has been really making sure that our young people, and especially our young people of color, aren't being the first people to be fired in the midst of this, which is a big risk when you think about big layoffs happening, because all these companies were paying not just lip service, which was fantastic, they were actually hiring Black and brown people because of some of the movements of the pandemic and other things that were happening. And so one of my jobs as CEO of Girls Who Code is to use my platform to always remind people, please don't have these be the people that you let go right now, because your commitment to diversity should mean that you're also committed to changing your culture, changing the face of your workforce, and support these young people during these uncertain times. Don't let them be the first ones to be laid off as all of this is happening. And so we're paying attention. I don't have the data yet because it's so fresh. We try to really keep up with our alumni community. We have a Discord channel. We have other ways that we try to get real-time data from them. We have focus groups because we also try to be responsive as an organization and see how we can be helpful to them. But it's a great question. Yeah.
Okay, well, we are out of time. So, Dr. Barrett, Tarika, I want to thank you for joining us to celebrate Women's History Month here at OTI and for talking about women in tech and Girls Who Code. We appreciate you sharing your experience, your insights, the information. And I want to thank you for getting us and talking about the importance of showing girls, people of color, non-binary folks, that they don't have to choose between technology, a career in technology, and helping society.
That's
That
right.
they can be the change makers. And I love that you guys are building a movement to empower girls to change culture, to change the image of what a technologist is, and to change the world. So
thank you so
thank
much.
you very much for being here with us
Janine,
today.
it was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
And I just have, as you know, a water bottle and an OTI pen.
I
So-
love me some swag. So this is fantastic. This is wonderful. Thank you for allowing me the space just to talk about our work. It means so much. And you have the ability to change lives too, especially as you bring in, did you say 75 young people? I cannot wait. Please send me pictures because a picture, it has to be many pictures. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
For those of you